And here on Indiana in the Morning, it's time to visit with Kristina Taylor-Porter from the Care Center of Indiana County. The topic today is a very serious one: violence committed against children, and frequently the kind of violence that is something that they are not really involved in the issue at hand, but they end up being the victims of them. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us here today. I was explaining to you where I wanted to go, and it's kind of a difficult angle to get at. But it is a very serious issue, and we've seen some recent examples of it.
Right.
Men particularly committing violence against children when their problem, their difficulty, and their dispute is with somebody else.
That's correct.
Do you see it often?
It's something that I don't think is reported on as prevalently as what other forms of child abuse are, but I do feel that it's something that is, even though it's not reported, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not happening there too. Anytime that somebody might be trying to get back at a spouse or a loved one and there are children involved, what better way for that person to harm the spouse or a loved one than to harm their child then too. So in some degree I would agree with that, yes.
Do children become a bargaining chip?
I think so, yeah. It's not something that a common person would really think of using their child as a bargaining chip, but whenever there's hostility involved in a relationship, I could see that happening, definitely.
We have had some very high-profile cases in Indiana County, particularly the early June incidents, a triple murder, 2 children killed and their mom,
Right.
and a gentleman who went to the home of his estranged wife, and the intent, purportedly, was to commit similar murders. That was stopped short, but one man did lose his life in that. Mm-hmm. We've also had incidents of men who were not the husbands but were the current companions of women, left alone with the children, and violence committed against the children there. Right. Why? Well, I guess why is the easy question to ask, but there's no easy answer to that, is there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The psychology behind it is something that I don't think anybody will ever fully understand. In essence, it seems more as though it's just a power type of relationship. That those individuals, if they lose power, they want to regain power. If it's even just having that power to commit such a heinous crime as to kill their wife or their children, they still in some way have gained some type of power in that relationship. They've had the power to take that child's life away as well as that spouse's life away. And so why is just one of those questions that I just don't think we ever have a clear-cut answer to it, because every situation is going to be different then too.
You frequently find yourself involved in the cases from a legal standpoint, testifying in court and helping with the investigations. Tell me about the Care Center of Indiana County and some of the work that you do when you come up against issues such as this.
Yeah, at the Care Center what we do is we do forensic interviews for children that have been sexually abused or have been physically abused or also witnessed to a crime too. We can do that interview with our district attorney's office. They are present during the interview, as well as the state police or local law enforcement. And then we also have children and youth services. And when I say they're present for the interview, they're actually observing the interview from another room. We have forensic interviewers are all trained by standards that have to meet National Children's Alliance, that they have to meet those standards to conduct forensic interviews. And so the forensic interviewer will sit down with the child in one room. The child's aware that they're being videotaped and audio taped and that there's people in another room watching the interview. So we can do the interview just one time, and the child's aware of that. And the nice thing about that model is, instead of the child having to go to CYS and be interviewed, or to law enforcement to be interviewed, and then eventually to prosecution to be interviewed, they're interviewed that one time. They have to maybe relive the trauma in that moment, but it's one time. And then we're able to send them out for services, for counseling with Alice Paul House, or with the Community Guidance Center as well. So we're almost like a one-stop shop for that child to come in one place, do the interview, and then they can go out for services too. We also provide supervised visits for families too, where domestic violence might be involved. There might be a protection from abuse order against the mom, but dad still has rights to see the child. And so dad will come to our agency, visit with their child, and a very comfortable setting, and we're able to observe that interview and make sure that nothing happens to the child then too.
Through the interview process, which will come after the incident, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
You probably are able to get some clues as to some of the things that are happening. Are there common themes that run through the interviews when you have dads or significant others committing violence against children?
We typically you'll have a child say, "Well, I'm not supposed to talk about this," or "Dad told me not to say anything," or you know, they still have a loyalty to protect that family member too. So they might say, "I can't say because it'll get my family in trouble." Children have so much responsibility put on them whenever they're in those type of situations because they are told to keep it a secret. And I would say secrecy is the biggest thing that we hear from the child. As well as, you know, they do have that loyalty and they have that love for their family that they don't want to get the dad in trouble. And so they'll be very, very careful on what they talk about then too.
Kids are asked to shoulder so much of the burden of a family when they're in a situation such as this, particularly when it's an estranged family, that has been separated. I want to get toward the angle of prevention of the crime, getting on the other side of it before the crime occurs. What are some of the things that families can look for? What are some of the things that children may be able to see, and then how is it that they would go about reporting some of the things that they might see as danger signs?
Yeah, a lot of things that family members will do is they'll see it and they'll think, "Oh, well, that's just the way, you know, that's just the way he behaves. He's always angry." But for family members to start to see a change in the child, you know, you might have a child that's normally really open and really wanting to talk with people. If they become a bit more withdrawn and their personality changes, that's more where parents should start, or family members should start to look at and question, what is it that is causing this child to become more and more withdrawn too? Because there are no real clear-cut signs unless you actually see a physical mark on the child. If you see, you know, black and blue marks or any cuts or anything like that, it's difficult to prove that there's some type of physical abuse, but there are other signs that come about that, you know, the child is just changing their demeanor, and starting to question that is something that's going to be helpful. If other kids see it, it's amazing how many children will come to, you know, their teacher and say, "I know about Susie being hurt. You know, Susie told me at school today that her dad does this to her." And then getting that ball rolling by contacting Children and Youth Services or contacting the law enforcement officers, or even contacting Childline, which is an anonymous database that people can contact, give them all their information, and they can report it anonymously and not have to say who's making that report.
You mentioned earlier the supervised visits where family members from split families can meet with their children and have their visits with their children. Are those observed?
Yes, we always have a staff member that's in that room at the time, and we typically have 2 people at the office in case there is any type of issue that might come about. But we always have 2 people at the office, and then we have 1 person sitting in during the supervised visit then too.
It is difficult to say the crime that was prevented, but certainly in your situation you may see signs that would, yes, cause you to alert authorities?
Yes. If we noticed anything during our supervised visit, we would notify the authorities right away.
Does that happen often?
No, we haven't really had too many issues with that. Typically they know that would be something that would happen. So if they're coming for the supervised visit, then they're typically on their best behavior too.
Some of the signs that you might notice, and family members might notice as well. We talked about those a little bit more. Could we develop that a little bit more? Some of the things that people might look for?
Yeah, some of the things that you might look for is the child. The child is, like I said, if they're typically really open and they start to become more withdrawn. Looking at schoolwork, if they're normally doing really well at school and then all of a sudden things change, starting to look at that too. If you see their behaviors changing as well, in school, if they are acting out more and more, within school, then that would be something else to look at, or even just in home too, or even what they're talking about. If they're talking about more and more violent things, starting to question that. I'm wondering why you're talking about that, you know, and they might start saying, oh, well, you know, my dad hits me, or I'm not allowed eating dinner at night if I, you know, do this at school that day, or something like that. Starting to really explore a little bit more.
What are some of the resources that are out there for people, particularly, I would guess, online resources, but through the Care Center of Indiana County as well? What are some of those resources that people can explore?
If the people want to visit our website, it's carecenter.of-indiana.co.org, and we have resources on there as well to recognize signs of physical, sexual, and neglect, all three types of abuse, as well as there's emotional abuse too. So there's those resources as well. The Family Support Alliance is also another website, and that's pafsa.org. They provide a lot of information about physical abuse and sexual abuse as well.
And people may always contact you as well and
Absolutely.
speak to you directly.
Yes, and our phone number is 724-463-8595.
She's Kristina Taylor-Porter, the Care Center of Indiana County. Thank you so much for coming to visit with us.
Thank you.